All right, today we are picking up again around the birth of Christ. Last week we talked about Christ being born, so I told you it felt like Christmas last week. Still feels like Christmas a little bit today, but we're going to look at the other part that happens oftentimes around the birth time, or at least it's often associated around the birth time. And this is the arrival of some people from a long distant land to come and honor the one that has been born King of the Jews. Now, before we do that, though, we're going to look at what happens in between that. So Jesus is born. You remember shepherds are visited that night. They come in and they do honor to Jesus. And then after that, the account moves into the purification of Mary and the baby being dedicated to the Lord. And so that is the event we're going to look at here. But we see a man named Simeon and a lady named Anna that are going to be prominent at this point. Now, we've already talked about Simeon a little bit just previous as we were kind of getting ourselves ready for this point. But now we're going to look at it a little more in depth. So if I can get you to look at Luke 2, Luke chapter number 2. And let's see, go verse 21, and we're going to read down to verse 38. So 21 to 25, Bill, 26 to 30, Wayne, 31 to 35 of Luke 2, Esther, and then 36 through 38, okay, of Luke 2. All right. Okay, Wayne. Phanuel. With fastings. Okay, so at this point, it's kind of unusual maybe for us we don't really focus on this part as a Christmas part of the story, but it is, if you want to go and officially look at it, it does play out in that story. And after Mary, well, first off, what do we see? The baby's already been given the name, but how many days is he officially named? How many days do they have to wait till there's an official naming of the child? 8 days, and it happened at the time of the circumcision. They wouldn't circumcise right when the baby was born. they would wait 8 days later, and the name would be given. But he had already been given that name at least twice before. He was given by the angel to Mary and given by the angel to Joseph. So he'd already been told twice what his name would be. And then Mary had to go through a purification rite. This is Jewish. This is completely Jewish. It's something that we're not normally familiar with, but one of the things after a person was to have a child, a woman would be declared unclean, so she couldn't enter into the temple of the Lord for a certain period of time, depending on which kind of child it is, whether it's a male or female. The uncleanness would last longer depending on which one. And so for 30 days, she's been unclean. And now part of the uncleanness now says that she's supposed to go in after the 30-day waiting period and then go through a sacrifice. And so normally what they would bring in was a lamb and a pigeon or a dove that would be brought in at that time. But for people that are extremely poor, they could be the lamb could be foregone, and you could have the pigeon, and that would be it. Even more poor than this. There's only one other time where you see it, but there's even more poor that you couldn't even afford a pigeon. You could bring in a meal offering, but very rare was that the case. But what do we see about them, these parents? What do they bring in? Turtle doves. They bring in 2 young pigeons instead of 1 lamb and 1 dove. They bring in 2 pigeons, indicating that they are wealthy or not wealthy. Not wealthy at all. They're very poor. This will tell you a little bit of understanding that the wise men had not yet showed up. Why would I say that? Because what did the wise men impart to the family? Gold, myrrh, and frankincense. And every one of those gifts were extremely valuable gifts. Okay? This is not a wealthy family by any means. They're extremely poor, and they can offer only what poor people are able to offer. And then part of the process, when Mary would go through the purification, there was a second part of it, and that is where if it was a firstborn child, that child would be dedicated to the Lord. And specifically, if it's a male child born, the one that opens the womb would be dedicated to the Lord. And that goes all the way back to the time of the Passover. If you remember back in the Passover, he mentions that the striking of the blood on the doorpost and all of that, he makes the point that just like he's going to go after the Egyptian firstborn, he expects that every firstborn of Israel belongs to him. And the way you redeem that child back from having to be slaughtered, which God would never do anyways, but in that understanding is you would have to have a sacrifice in the place of that child. And so that child would be dedicated to the Lord. It also is connected to the fact of the priesthood, that the priest would take their children, and you were in a sense saying, well, we're not giving our children over to the priesthood so that child belongs to us. And the Lord was saying, well, the only way to compensate is that you have a sacrifice in the place of that child. So those 2 things are kind of talked about in the Old Testament law of the sacrifice that would be offered in behalf of the firstborn. And so in this case, think about this. The Redeemer is being redeemed. Think about that. Isn't that an amazing thought? The Redeemer is being redeemed here at this point. Now, who's Simeon? Hold on, I heard someone say he's a priest. Is he a priest? Does it tell us he's a priest? You know, that's a common idea because he's in the temple that people automatically assume he's a priest. But just because you're in the temple grounds doesn't mean you're a priest. Not everybody that was in the temple grounds were priests, right? Obviously, Mary and Joseph weren't priests, and they were there in the temple grounds. He's an old man, we're told. It says that he is just and devout. What does it mean to be just? It's a word that comes out of justified. He's been made justified before God. He's a saved person. If we're going to look at it that understanding, he's been made right before God even before Jesus has showed up. he is already righteous in God's standing. How is that the case? He was looking for Jesus, right? In fact, that's what it tells us, that he was looking for the consolation that would come to Israel. The word consolation is just the word to console. The one who would come and bring consolation, one that would bring somebody sad and upset, and you console that person. You know what that means? You're comforting them. Yeah, you're bringing them help in a time when they're hurting. And in that sense, that's what Jesus is said to be for Israel. He would be their consoler. He would console them during this time. And in this way, it's not that he would just come to them, but that he would be their redeemer. He would come to save them from their sin. And Simeon was already looking forward to that day. And he had been given a promise. What was the promise from the Lord? Yeah. So think about that. If this guy's already old and he gets this promise, he's kind of living like he's invincible at this point. I'm going to live until I see this child. Right? You jump off a cliff, I'm still going to be alive. Probably not in good condition, though. Probably didn't do that. I'm being silly there. But get the point. What he's saying is that he was promised by the Lord that he would not see death until this day. And then, in fact, what does he say after he gets to see this child? Let me depart in peace. I have now seen the one I've been waiting for. Now, how did he know this was the child? I mean, is this the only child in the entire temple that's ever been dedicated to the Lord? I'm sure that was happening all the time, right? Yeah, it could have been. There was more than one that day. It says the Holy Spirit led him into that place and to where Mary and Joseph were when they were dedicating the child. And it tells us that Simeon picks him up and then begins to bless the parents and bless the child. And usually, oftentimes, when you see blessings happening in the Bible, usually some kind of prophetic thing is being said as well about them, what they will be, what they will do, what they will accomplish. And look at what he says here. So, verse number 31, verse 30, he says, "For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles, the glory of thy people Israel." Now, this is just telling us what Jesus would be. He'd be the source of salvation, not just to the people of Israel, but to all people, to the Gentiles as well. If you're saved in here, you're part of that blessing. Okay? You've received part of that blessing here. And then Joseph says, it says, "And Joseph and his mother marveled at those things which were spoken." And then Simeon specifically takes Mary aside and tells her about how this child is going to affect her. Look what he says in verse 34. So Simeon blessed them, and he said unto Mary his mother, "Behold, this child is set for the fall and rising again of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken against." Anybody got an idea what that implies? In fact, let me read the next verse, because the next verse kind of gives you more of that. "Yea, a sword shall pierce through thine own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed." What do you think he means by this? He's referring obviously to one part, that they're going to reject him and he's going to die, and it's going to be like a sword that's pierced through your soul, Mary. When Mary was standing there at the cross, it wasn't easy for her to watch what was going on, was it? Wouldn't be for any mother, I would hope, to watch what was happening there. But it talks about the fact that he's going to be a source of falling and rising again. What is that implying? I don't know that the falling and rising again thing. No. Yeah, I think that's really what's happening. He's going to be a stumbling block to some, and he's going to be one that gives eternal life to others. I honestly believe that's what he's talking about here. There's some people that said that they're going to have to fall and then raise up. They have to be broken under his preaching and raised. That could be understanding that way. That could be understood that way. Or it could be also what I think the rest of the text is telling us, is that he's going to be a revealer of hearts. People who are all religious and they wear this big religious costume that make them look good in the eyes of the world, he's going to reveal them for what they really are. He's going to reveal that they're hypocrites. I've often said it before. I said it's similar to what Donald Trump did when he was the president. He unveiled a lot of things that no one knew was going on. I think in a lot of ways that's what Jesus did with the religious crowd. He unveiled just how corrupt they really were, how ungodly they really were. And then he says here to, or then it goes on to Anna. So look at what it says about Anna here. She's called a prophetess. What do you think about that? Thoughts on that? Someone that preaches the word usually. Now sometimes, give you the idea of a prophetess, sometimes it could be somebody who is a teacher of the word. Could be someone who gives some kind of a prophecy. You see that in the book of Acts a couple times where you see some young ladies that are considered prophets or prophetess. Sometimes it could be simply a matter of the fact that she's a daughter of a prophet. You'll see that used in the scripture as well, to be called a prophetess. Doesn't mean she does anything spiritual, but she's just related. So what this means, I don't know, but I guess by what you see here is that she's someone who's dedicated to the Lord enough that she's willing to serve the Lord in however way, and she's willing to point people to the truth. And that's what she does here, doesn't she? She happens to see Simeon doing what he's doing, and then she goes, "Oh, here he is!" And then it says she went around to the temple and telling everybody that he has come. That he has come. And by the way, as we're going to see here in just a moment, to go around and tell everybody that the king has come is a dangerous thing to do. You understand that? Anybody have an idea why it's dangerous to do? Because of who we're going to see, King Herod, who's absolutely a jealous king that wants nothing to do with us. Huh? Well, yeah, she's pretty old. Yeah, by the way, did you notice there, it appears that she's only been married for a short time, 7 years, and yet she's been a widow for 84 years. How many years is that, Bill? 84 years. She's old. I mean, she was married for 7 years. Add that to 84. That makes her 91. Then add whatever age she was when she got married. She's probably 10, 11, 12, into over past 100. I mean, you're looking at somebody that's very, very old. So yeah, maybe she didn't have any worries. She's been there for a long time, and she's lived a full life. Yeah. All right. So we have people here that are obviously waiting, right? Waiting for the day, and now they have had the privilege to see this child. Okay. Now, at this point, we're going to look at the famous wise men. Go back to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2. Now, for whatever reason, we're not told the reason, but I'm guessing. I've only been able to guess because it doesn't tell us. Instead of, after this point, Joseph and Mary heading back to Nazareth, they stay in Bethlehem. And it's like they make Bethlehem their new home, instead of heading back to Nazareth, at least for this time. And the only reason why they leave Bethlehem is because of a threat, as that we're going to see. And then they were going to come back after the threat was over, but then there was another threat there, as we'll see, and so they moved back home to where they came from. But the reasoning why they stayed and didn't head back as soon as they were done with all the process of having the child, and the child being, the purification of Mary, and the child being dedicated to the Lord. The reason why they stayed in Bethlehem, we're not told. I got a few guesses. One, who wants to go back to a place where everybody thinks you had a child out of wedlock? That might be one of the reasons. Two, Joseph might have found work and found a good job there. I mean, being a carpenter, he probably was able to find work pretty well anywhere he wanted, and he found some there, maybe. That could be. Possibly, it could be because they realized this was a fulfillment of a prophecy that Bethlehem is where the king comes from. And so maybe staying in Bethlehem might have been the reason for that, because they just wanted to be part of that fulfillment. So we're not told. We're not told exactly what the reasoning is, why they stayed. Could be that the Lord just told them to stay. That could be a fourth one. We don't know. Yes, sir. Yeah. So what you have Luke doing is leaving out part of the story. So yeah, every once in a while you'll have them condense portions of Scripture and not tell you the entire story. So yeah, because Matthew tells you obviously he's still there. They're still there. So
it says in verse 6 that they call him a governor instead of a king.
yeah, we're not there yet. So
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
All right. Chapter 2. Need some readers. We're going to do 1 through 12 first. So if I get 1 through 5, can you read real well for us? Okay, 1 through 5 of Matthew chapter number 2. You have Matthew 2? Okay. And 6 through 10, David, and then I need 11. How about I do 11 and 12? Could you do 11 and 12 for me?
Is that chapter?
Matthew chapter 2, 11 and 12. Okay, I want someone fill in for the first part. Okay, BJ, get the first part there. Okay, you do 11 and 12, okay? And you'll be the last one reading.
Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Judaea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come towards him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes and people together, who many of them were Christ should be born. And they said unto him, Bethlehem of Judea, for thus is written by the prophet.
Okay, next reader.
And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. When they heard the king departed, lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy.
Okay, hold on a second. Did you read past that to 10? Okay. All right. 2, you do 11, 12 right there.
And when they were coming to the house, they saw the young child, Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented to him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. And rained wine of God in a manner that they should not return to. Herod, they departed into their own country another way.
Good job. Okay. I'm going to give you a bit here. I'm going to ask some questions here, but I'm going to ask can TJ and Trevor help hand these out, one to each person?
Okay,
Might have to split them up a little bit here. But work our way. Yeah, okay. All right, now while they're handing out, I want to ask you some questions. Why do you think Herod is troubled of the news of the wise men showing up saying, Where's he that's born King of the Jews? That's right. Okay. He's the king, and he doesn't want anybody taking his place. Yeah. By the way, just to give you a bit of understanding about this guy named Herod, he's not a nice guy. Herod was in fact, there's several Herods in the Bible. Before we get into looking at, did you get one to everybody? Okay.
I believe so.
You got one for yourself?
Yes, I do.
You got one? Okay. Before get on there, there's several Herods in the Bible. Okay, you find this Herod here. There's some other Herods that are mentioned in the time of Jesus. There's a Herod that's mentioned after the time of Jesus. In the book of Acts, you see one mentioned. There's a few different Herods. that are happening. It's similar to when you see the name or the title Pharaoh used in the Old Testament, talking about the king of Egypt. There's multiple pharaohs that play even in the time of the Exodus. Okay, there's not just one that's there as you see. Now, Herod, the first here that we see mentioned, is Herod the Great, as he's titled normally. And he would reign in Jerusalem from about 37 to about 4 AD, 37 BC to 4 AD. Okay, so 37 years before the AD part kicks in, and then you got the AD part, and about 4 years after that. Okay, he was installed as a king over Judea by the Roman government in about 40 BC. And eventually he had to conquer Jerusalem. Jerusalem didn't just say, oh, here you go, you can be the king. He had to conquer it. He had to actually take it and make it his own by conquest. And he was looked at by the Jews as an illegitimate king. One, he's not even Jewish. Do you know what he is? Anybody have an idea where he comes from? No, Christian's not a type. No, that wasn't either. No, he's not a Roman.
Is he a Muslim?
No, they weren't around yet. He was an Edomite. Edomite meaning the children of Esau. Can you see why they would have even more reason why they wouldn't want this guy? Remember Jacob and Esau, the whole rivalry between the two? That rivalry didn't stop after them. They still don't like the Edomites. And there's bad blood between them that's been that way for a long time. In fact, there's a whole book in the Old Testament that's written against the Edomites for what they did during the time of the Babylonian captivity of Jerusalem. Remember Nebuchadnezzar came and he captured them? Some of them tried to flee, and guess who it was that told Nebuchadnezzar where they're at? It was the Edomites. And it says they stood in the way and blocked them from being able to run away and said, hey, Nebuchadnezzar, they're over here. And so there's a whole book written to address the judgment that's coming upon them for helping out the terrible thing that happened upon Jerusalem. Okay? So they don't like them. And as anybody knows, Jews keep a lot of good historical records. They don't forget their history. And they keep their bad blood going for a long time. So they don't like this guy. And secondly, he knows it that they don't like this guy. So this guy does a lot of things to stop any kind of threat. It wasn't uncommon for people to come up missing because of this guy. Because if you got a prophet going up saying, hey, the Messiah is coming, the real king of the Jews is coming, guess what that triggers? That triggers somebody coming up missing, right? And that happened over and over and over. That historical records point to that happening over and over and over. Okay? One of the things, he even killed some of his own children for the threat of being a king before he was ready to give up his king role. I mean, they're ones that are supposed to take the throne from him when he's dead. He had some of them killed. He had 10 wives. He killed some of his own wives because he was fearful that they were plotting against him. He actually ended up marrying the high priest's wife to try to get in good with the high priest's wife, the sister of the high priest, say it right. The sister of the high priest. He didn't marry the high priest's wife. The sister of the high priest. And he tried to get in good with the Israelites or the Jews at that point. That didn't make them any more happy. Okay? And then had her killed later and pretended to be sad about it at a funeral. So this is that guy. Any bit of threat to him is going to be dealt with swiftly. And that's what we're going to see here. Now, you have a worksheet here that I handed out here. What we're going to look at first off, before we get into the King Herod side, I want you to go through what we've just read, because we're going to look at it a little bit more here in a moment, what you just read about the wise men. And I want you to give me all the characteristics you can think about the wise men, the good characteristics we see about these. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the wise men before we do that. Wise men, traditionally people think there were 3. Why do they think 3? Because of the 3 gifts. Does it tell us there are 3? No, it could have been 2. It could have been 10, 15, 20 of them. We really don't know. And in their, what was that? Oh. And in their their arrival, they wouldn't have gone on their own, like oftentimes you see in the pictures and the postcards. Wise men were often known as the Oriental kingmakers. If you go back and you look at some of the things that they were involved in, the very first time you see wise men mentioned is in the book of Daniel. And they're involved in being counselors to the king. They help the king. They give wisdom to the king. They're involved in trying to interpret dreams at one point for the king. We see that happening. Wise men, by tradition, would become some people that were so well educated that anybody who wants to become a king or who's being, in the line of becoming the next king would have to go through their training and their teaching before they could ever be a king. So they were looked at as king makers. So when they are coming into Jerusalem saying, where's the one that was born to be the king? Can you see even more why Herod wouldn't go after those guys? They probably have their own military with them when they came. They probably have their own group of soldiers that have accompanied them in the process. So Herod isn't going about to destroy these guys that are making this potential threat to Herod. Okay? And by the way, they assume that Herod knows about this guy that's been born King of the Jews. And assume that Herod's excited about it. But he's not. And neither is the rest of Jerusalem. Okay? So let's go ahead and give you a couple minutes. I want you to give me as many as you can find of things that you note about these men and about what they're doing and about what happens. I'll help you in a minute, okay? You do your best on your own and then whatever you can't find. So look at Matthew 2.
Okay, I can do that.
Give you about 2 more minutes. This thing is making me cold. Blowing right on me.
Did they ride on donkeys back in the day, or mules, or what did they?
Well, hold on. That's something good to answer. That's the Christmas card look, riding on the back of camels. But does it tell us that they did?
Obviously, it was donkeys.
We don't know what they rode. We don't even know if they rode. Yeah, I imagine they did. But we're not told. We're not told anything about how they got there at all. Could have rode in chariots. Yeah, it's possible.
Poor donkey is so funny.
You sounded like one there. Yeah, most likely they did ride in chariots. I would think that's probably the way they made it. If they found roads, which they did, they had travel roads. Yep. They would have had roads that led all the way over there. Yep. Traveler road, trading lines. That's just what you see in the movies and in the Christmas cards. They had trade routes all up and down through that area.
If they go back to Jerusalem to this day, will they have any monument
Yeah, they do. They're more, they're traditional things. Nobody knows for sure on some of them. They just say they are. So they have like the church at Bethlehem that they believe, and you have to duck down to get into it. And they say that they believe that's where he was born, but nobody knows, and it's in a cave. I don't really think that that's probably accurate, but
Actually, so far, want to read them?
not yet.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to give you about 30 seconds, and then we're done. I got 8, so see if you can come up with more than I have. You got 2. Ten seconds.
If the church wants to light a house for a while.
Okay. All right, so give me what you got.
I'll go first.
Give me what you have. Go ahead.
I agree. White, I'll put number 1, the wise men worship baby Jesus.
Good. That's a good one.
Other is they gave him gifts.
Gave him gifts. Good. Those are 2 good ones. All right. Any others? Anybody else participate? All right, Darla. Willing to travel a distance. Yeah. Followed a star.
This are David.
Is that there? Does it say they followed the star? Yeah. We're going to look at that one in a moment. Okay. Yes. Okay. Had joy. Worshipped. Warned by a dream. Good. Okay. His real motives. Okay. They believed that Herod was sincere. Okay, did you have any?
I put down rejoiced at his birth, called Jesus a king, came to worship the child, gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Okay, we're not on the other side yet. So, okay.
Does not want
Wait, we're not on that side yet. Just a minute. Okay. Any else? Yep. They knew and studied Jewish law. That's reading into it a little bit, but I'm guessing they would know. I guess they would have known, right? I mean, you got foreigners that are going to know something about this guy. So that would tell us something in there, doesn't it? Okay. Kingmakers. And that's something you'd have to maybe know some history on, but yep. Okay. Any others? Interpreters. They did in the past, yep. Okay. What we're learning from this passage, though, that's what we want to really get. Any others that are from this passage? Okay, let me give you what I got. Okay. They were looking for the coming of the king, which could fit into Miss Andrea's to some degree. They were willing to travel a distance to come and find the king. We're not told how far they traveled, so we don't know whether it's a long trip or a short trip. It just tells us they're from the east. They sought the new king diligently. Now, this is one of the reasons why I'll say they weren't following the star, because if they were following the star, it would have led them right to the child immediately rather than go to Jerusalem and find out where he's at by Herod.
Maybe they want to make
Okay.
certain before they.
Yeah. Well, the star we're going to see here is shows up and then it's not there. Okay. They desired to worship the new king. Okay. They rejoiced. I heard this one from some when they were guided by the star. And that point gives us a little understanding that the star reappears. That it wasn't something they were following the entire trip. It reappears at a certain point, and this star does something unique. It goes over the very house where they're staying. Now, this is probably not the North Star. Okay? It's probably not any star you're going to find in the sky. This seems to be something very supernatural happening. Okay? Stars don't do that. Do they? Yeah, has anybody been led by something before that moved in the heavens? The whole nation of Israel was moved by something that moved, or followed a whole thing that moved, right? The pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire. It's very possible that that's something similar to what was happening here. Thank you. Okay.
Well, a star is a sun.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily what this is. Okay. They rejoiced when they were guided by the star. Okay. They went to Bethlehem immediately. And by the way, who told them to go to Bethlehem? The star or somebody? King Herod did. And where did King Herod find out to go to Bethlehem from? From his own priest told him that. And they quoted out of Micah, the very passage we looked at, that out of Bethlehem will come the one that will rule his people. Okay? So they said it's got to be in Bethlehem. They presented valuable gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They obeyed God immediately when they were warned not to return to Herod. Okay? And they were warned in a dream. Let me just kind of throw this thing about the star for a moment before we move on. The star appears, it seems, to appear to them while they're in the east. As a signification, it's time to go. They see the star. It doesn't appear from what the text tells us that the star was leading them every step of the way. They already knew where they had to go. Where'd they have to go? What they thought was Jerusalem. And that's where they're headed. When they get to Jerusalem, they're expecting that everybody else knows about this child that's been born, King of the Jews. But it has been kept relatively secret, partly because the fear of King Herod. Because if you remember what it says, that when they asked the question, where's he that's born King of the Jews, it says that when the people heard these things, it says they were troubled, or Herod was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. You know why all Jerusalem was troubled? Because when this king's mad, people come up missing. Okay? So nobody wants to go around and, hey, he's here, he's there, if they even knew it. Okay? So it's been kept relatively secret up to this point. And then after they have their conversation, and Herod does his little crafty thing of telling them, oh, I want to come and worship him too, just tell me where he's at, and all this kind of stuff we're going to see. Then the star appears again when they're in Jerusalem, and they follow the star, and it leads them to the house, not the cave, where the baby's at, or where the young child is, okay? About 6 miles. About a 6-mile trip, yep. All right, so now let's go ahead and read a little bit more. We're going to look at Herod's line, or what happens with Herod. So I need some readers from 13. Let's do this way. We get some single verse readers. I need verse 13 to 18. Ready? 13. Who wants to do it? 13, okay? 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, and then 18. Andrew, okay. Matthew 2, 13 through 18. Yep, go back to Matthew there, to Matthew chapter 2. Okay, go ahead and start us off. Whoever had the first one. Who? Trevor. Oh.
Matthew chapter 2.
Yeah. 2 verse 13.
All right.
Right there.
All right.
You got it. Okay.
And when they are departed, know the angel of the Lord
Appeareth.
to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee to Egypt. And be thou ready until I bring thee
Word.
for Herod, or seek the young child to be stored in him.
Okay.
He arose and took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt.
Okay. 15. Okay. 16.
Herod, when he saw that it was not of the wise men, exceedingly wroth, and sent
Rhema. Okay, so first off, the wise men, what are they told in a dream? Don't come back to Herod. Go, leave a different way than the way you came. Now, again, if they're an entourage of people, do you think Herod's going to see them leaving, or people are going to see them leaving? Yeah. It's not going to be secretly. Even though they may want to not go the same way and be stopped by any of Herod's men who may have thought this is the way they came in. They're leaving, but they aren't going to be able to leave without being noticed. Okay? Just as it was seen by many, it will be seen by many as they leave. Okay. What does it say that Herod does when he finds out he's been mocked of the wise men, or that they've chosen not to respond back to his plea to come back and tell him where the baby is? Huh? Exceedingly wroth. He was extremely mad. And so what does he decide to do? Okay, why does he come up with that age? Why didn't he just kill all of them that are 10 years and younger? Because they're smarter. They know how to run and hide better. 2 years and younger. It says the reason why. Did you see there? It's come out of what it says in verse number 16. Look at it. It says, and Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coast thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he diligently inquired of the wise men. Do you know what that's telling us? The wise men expected that the child would be about 2 years old instead of a baby. They didn't expect him to be just brand new born like the nativity scenes show or the Christmas cards show. That he was at least 2 years old. And so he's going to go for anybody that's 2 and under. Okay?
So it took him 2 years to get there.
All right. Next. Any other thoughts? How does this tell us about the arrival of the wise men in Jerusalem? Did they arrive the night of the birth then?
No.
They arrived at least 2 years later. Okay? All right, so what was Herod's goal then in ordering the death of all these children? Get rid of the threat. Get rid of the threat. Okay? Get rid of the threat. Now, let's go to that worksheet that you have. And I've got, let's see, how many do I have? I have 7 things. I want you to tell me about Herod's response. 7 things. You don't have to give me 7 things. I want you to give as many as you can get. You might be able to get more than 7. But see what you find out of the text and give me your answers. And I'll give you about 2 minutes. And this is in the passage we just looked at. Verses 13 through 18. And you can look previously as well out of the first part of the chapter as well. Because there are some things said there too. All right, so let's see what you got about Herod. Bill, give me a couple things. Troubled at the birth. Okay. 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 All right. Anybody else? Wayne. Yeah. But it would also tell you how fearful people were of that king, as well. I'm not saying the priests were godly. Their primary reason why Jesus was crucified. Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah. It's like God kind of kept that apart for them to be able to have their private worship time with Him. Yeah. Okay. Did you have another one? You remember part of the taxation thing? Well, you know what they're going to find out in taxation census? People's age. And that's probably part of where that came out of, how they would have known. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I got one.
Give me.
Herod, that's spelled right, H-E-R-O-D.
H-E-R-O-D, yep.
Herod, Herod is, I wonder what slew means.
Slew means he killed.
Slew all the children under 2 years old.
Under 2 years old, okay.
That's kind of abortion, if you look at it that way.
It can be a different type of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any others? Any others? Hands? He was a liar. False worship. Okay.
You call him a traitor?
Well, to God, but he wasn't even claiming to belong. Yeah, I guess he claimed with his lips, but didn't with his actions. Yeah. Any others? Do you have any others, Andrea? Okay. Exceeding wrath. He's an angry guy. Shh. Let it be. Yep. Okay. Stayed in Egypt. Well, that he ended up dying. By the way, how he dies a pretty nasty death. He ends up having his stomach. He's got some kind of, like it says, it bred worms type of thing, and he ends up dying a pretty savage, gross death, puking and other stuff, and does it till he dies. And one of the ways he knew he had a bunch of people that hated him. And the way he would get people to mourn for him at his death is he rounded up many of the nobles in Israel, and he was going to have them all killed at the time of his death, so there'd be weeping at his death. But the amazing thing is that his own people chose not to do what he said. And they rounded him up, but when he died, they didn't slay those people. They let him go. But that's what he wanted. I mean, that's how savage the man was. He was a horrible person. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right, let me give you some ones that I got. It says he was not looking for the coming king. 2, he would not even go to Bethlehem to see the king. 3, he said he wanted to worship the king but really didn't. 4, he desired to kill the new king. 5, he got angry when his plans were thwarted. 6, he worked against God and tried to kill the Christ. 7, he killed many children in his jealousy. And by the way, it didn't say he only did it in Jerusalem. It says in the country round about. So he went for everybody around the area, hoping that maybe they're outside the city will get him out that way. So, yeah. So here's some thoughts I want to summarize here. The wise men, if you think about it, and the king give us the two responses that everybody always gives toward Jesus. It's one of the two, every time. It's either give my heart to him and become a worshiper of him and give gifts to him, all those kinds of things that fit into the one who gives their heart to him, or reject him and sometimes pretend to love him, say nice things about him, tell people that you really want to worship him, but he's not at all the one you're ready to follow or give your life to. And Herod represents the second. Really, those are the two responses all the time, if you think about it. They're the two responses to the gospel. When you give the gospel, those are the oftentimes the two ways people respond. Either they get right, they humble their heart, and they get right with him, and they genuinely follow him, or they turn against him, or they demonstrate they're already against him and reject him even further. So that's where the challenge then is to ask, where is your heart? Just because you're sitting in a church service like this morning doesn't mean he has your heart, right? Doesn't mean you are a wise person. Fools reject him and reject his authority over them. So make sure your heart's right with him. All right, so let's finish with some questions and then I'm done. Number one, how did you summarize the response of the wise men? Just give me a general. I don't want all the 7 or 8 things you got. Just a general idea. They're true worshipers of the true king, right? Okay? And offering him gifts and submitting to him as king, worshiping him as a king. By the way, they're not just worshiping as a king only over one nation, even though they understand that apparently, that he is going to be connected to the Jews. But the fact that they offer him worship means they know more than just the fact that he's a king. He's the high king. He's the king of all kings, as the prophecies talked about. Okay? Number 2, how did you summarize the response of Herod? Awful. Hatred. Sought to deny the rightful rule of Christ, right? A rejecter of him. Willing to do the worst to kill or to get rid of him. All right, number 3. What was one interesting nugget from the text today that you would like to share with others, and what would you hope to teach them or encourage them in?
Person to follow the word of Jesus, follow his footsteps.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any others? Christ survives. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any others? Okay. Yeah. A Hollywood Hallmark story they glamorize it. It's not the same story, is it? No, not completely. I like what you said there, Bill, about he survives. My final message on Thursday night is going to be about the bruising of the serpent, and that in the process of time, the serpent has been trying to kill the child that would come. And you watch it, you see it through history, the continual trying to destroy the promised child. And even when he does come, he's never able to do it. And at the cross, it's his last attempt, and it turns out to be his own undoing. I think it's amazing. It's an amazing story. You know, he thinks he's got him there. Bite at him, I'm going to destroy him. And he dies, but it turns out to be his own undoing, because at the cross is where Jesus destroys Satan's power. So, because no longer can Satan hold people in bondage to the power or to the fear of death because of Christ. Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to... Well, you remember that Psalm chapter 2, it says he's going to laugh at them. They say, let's break the cords off our back. Let's get rid of this king. And it says, and the one that's sitting in the heavens is going to laugh at them. He's going to have them in derision. He's just going to mock them because of their foolishness. They think they can remove him. You won't, no matter what you try to do. Okay? And one day everybody's going to bow the knee to him, regardless of whether they want to or not. Even Herod will. Okay? Any others? Any other thoughts? Okay, number 4. Okay? As you think about your friends and family, you can identify those you believe are truly submitting to Jesus as King and those who are holding on to the throne for themselves. What evidences do you see for that conclusion? Not asking you to give names, just what do you see as evidences of somebody who's got a Herod heart and somebody who's got a heart like a wise man?
How about the people that say Jesus? A lot of people say Herod.
Okay?
I know about red, but I heard about something now. What was it? I have no idea.
Okay. Let's get someone else here. Any other ideas?
I think Putin,
Huh?
with the Ukrainian war.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's look for evidences of somebody who's a wise man heart and somebody who's a Herod type heart. What would you look for? I'm not asking for a name. I'm asking for a description. What do you say? Biden and Trump. Okay, no names, please. Okay, has Jesus on their lips but not on their heart, right? And in their actions, okay? Okay. All right, any others?
Those people that you see sometimes say, I'm already Christian. And,
Like you in the skit?
yeah, they say, I'm not, you don't seem like it. You don't have the actions of a
Don't have the spirit of a Christian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, they say it, but they try to lie about it.
Okay. Any others? We're going to be done here. We're already running past time. Any others? I'll give one more answer. Anybody else? Frederick. Okay, so a lot of hypocrisy. Yeah. Yep, similar to Israel, wasn't it? In that sense of having a religious culture, but heart far from him. And that just reveals how shallow our faith really is, because after a month or so, they're back to doing what they used to. So, yeah. You weren't alive during that time, were you? Or were you? Oh, okay. Yeah, you barely recognized it, though, didn't you? Yeah. Okay. When it happened? Okay. So you do remember it? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. All right, we've opened up a can of worms that we need to close right now. Thank you, Mr. BJ. All right, let's go ahead and pray. Can I have Wayne, why don't you close us in prayer, and then we'll come back about 15 after.